Thanks everyone for joining us today for today's webinar on the different languages options at Flinders University. We're going to get started. My name is Nicole Lieber. I'm a student advisor here at Flinders, and basically my role is to help you perhaps figure out what kind of study you might like to do, different ways of combining different degrees in different areas, and also different pathways to university. I was actually a student at Flinders myself, but I am no by any means a expert in any particular course area, which is why we have Eric Bouvet with us today. So Eric is a senior lecturer in the languages area at Flinders, and he's actually the coordinator for the course here as well. So I'll hand over to Eric in just a moment, but throughout today, if you do have any questions or want to ask something along the way, you've got a little chat box on your screen there, so please feel free just to type it in, and we'll either answer it as part of the webinar or I'll make sure we respond to you at the end of the day as well. So please feel free to put whatever questions you've got in there as well, but I'll hand over to Eric. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicole. So I'm Eric. I am actually in languages. I teach French, and I teach also applied linguistics, which I'm going to be talking about as well. So the first question, basically, which you can see on the screen, is why study languages? Well, it is true that, sometimes languages can get a little bit of a bad rap at school, and, some students find it a bit annoying to have to do languages, but it's actually quite important to revisit languages at university, and you don't have to do languages actually if you don't have done year 12, haven't done year 12 languages. You can do languages from the start, and it's very important actually to know that. So with a bit more, a bit more maturity, you come to university, and a lot of students actually revisit languages and are quite happy to start again, or even to start another language. Some people could have done, let's say, Spanish at school or Italian at school and decide to do another language, and we've got quite a few to choose from. So there's many reasons why you should study languages. I think, I would say that the main one is that it can be of great benefit to you, and it can also be fun. What's really interesting about languages is that, yes, it can be a bit challenging because you have to learn words and you have to know some grammar rules, but at the same time, it's very interesting because it gives you a window into another language and another culture. So that's why it's very interesting. And we have people doing languages for a variety of reasons. Some students do languages because they've simply traveled to the country where the language is spoken and they really like that country and they want to go back. Other students have relatives from that country, either their parents or their grandparents, and they want to kind of keep that language alive in their family. Other students can see themselves working in a particular field, let's say in international relations or international law, and they know that they're going to need a language for that particular field, and they take up the language for that reason. And other students, they just do it for the pleasure. So it's actually quite nice to have a language alongside another area of study, such as, for example, law or psychology or international studies or tourism, and so on and so forth. And also there is a category of students who want to be teaching, and these people think that it's a great idea to be teaching languages. So that's basically why studying languages. Now, another reason is that it's probably more likely to give you a job than if you don't have a language at all. And I should actually move to the next slide because I've got a quote there which says adults who know one or more foreign languages are more likely to be employed than those who don't know any language. And this is actually true even if you only have basic competencies in the language, because having even basic competencies in the language can actually help you with a variety of skills. And I'll talk about this later on. And those skills, which are very valued by employers, are communication skills. So this one is very obvious, because what we do when we learn a language is actually we talk to each other, we talk to other people. So exchanging, communicating, talking is very important. But also maybe more than in some other areas of studies, we tend to work in groups and in teams to do various activities, such as projects, for example, such as debating, role-playing, and so on and so forth. So those interpersonal skills are quite important as well, because you constantly interact with someone else. I mentioned debating, I mentioned role-playing, but we also do some oral presentations at every level, actually, starting from very simple ones to more elaborate ones in later years. So we also develop presentation skills in the language. Language learning is about problem solving, because there's a lot a language learner doesn't know. So their problem solving skills are always used to, for example, try to guess at particular vocab in a text where there's a particular word they don't understand, and they, instead of just looking into the dictionary, they might actually try to guess at it. But there's also the whole grammatical aspect of it, where you actually try to work out how rules works, and that's quite a significant part of language learning as well. You have to be organized, because there's the work is frequent, and it basically requires for students to be on top of their vocabulary, to make sure they do their exercises, because unlike other areas of studies, in languages you have to really work on a very regular basis, pretty much on a daily basis, as opposed to a weekly basis, which could be the case for other subjects or topics at Flinders. So by doing this, you learn a lot of very, very good learning strategies, which can help you not only learn languages, but help you learn other things as well, because those skills are transferable. So yes, you can do language for fun, and a lot of people do it. You can do language because you want to be employed in an area where you need a language. But you can also, and we have some students who want to do that, you can also look at languages and applied linguistics, which I'm going to talk about a bit later on, as doors that are open to not only employment, but also research. And this in Australia and in other countries. We have many former students who actually work in a variety of fields in Australia, but also very significantly in other countries. And for them it's a bit like a dream come true, because they love the language, they love the country, and they get to work there, and that's fantastic. So what is very obvious when we talk about careers and languages is that translation, interpretation and teaching are the very obvious areas where people could go into. But there's other areas. For example, diplomacy and international affairs are very important, because they require languages as well. We have defense and aid abroad, which also require a language. And we do have quite a few students who've gone down the track of working for NGOs and so on and so forth. But there's other fields that people might not actually think about, which are related to languages as well. Journalism is one of them, and media as well, because you could get to travel overseas and do reports from overseas, so languages can come very handy as well. Obviously trade and tourism and hospitality, which are growing fields in Australia. But probably what is very important for people studying languages is that they can travel. They get opportunities to travel, not only through Flinders, but also outside of Flinders. What is very good as far as being a language student is that you have space in your program of study for spending either a few weeks or a few months in the country and get credited for it. We've got a lot of agreements with other universities in many countries, and those agreements allow students to study in very good conditions in that country and get credited when they come back to Flinders. So we've got a range of study abroad programs which, as I said, can be credited towards your studies at Flinders. Of course, when you travel, you meet new people, so that's one of the great things about language learning, is that you go places and get to meet people you would not normally meet in Australia, and that's very nice. And I've got a few quotes here for you to have a look at from students who say that speaking with people from different culture is very enriching, and languages enables you to do this. And another one, learning a language develops your interest in other people, and that's what is, to me, the central point of language learning, is that it's a people-centered field of study, and you get not only to interact with people in Australia, within Flinders, within your own class, but you also get to interact with people you would not normally have an opportunity to interact with. So that's the great thing. I've got another few quotes here, and I'm going to go through them very quickly. So students say that one of them says, "I really enjoy meeting people with different perspective on life, with different values and different traditions." So what is important in this particular quote is the word different. We meet people who have values, traditions and ways of life that, may be very different from ours, and sometimes it can be a bit strange to us to go to a country where the traditions are so different, but it's always very interesting to compare ourselves with what happens in other countries. Because, as the second person says, meeting other culture, you start thinking about your own country and background. So it's not only looking at other people through your lens, but also it's looking at yourself and looking at your culture as well through the lens of the other country. And that's equally as important. And as the third person said, and as I kind of pointed out before, you don't realize that even the most basic things can be very different. And I'm not talking about, Asian countries necessarily. I'm talking about some countries such as France, where I'm from, for example, where shopping, for example, is quite different in the way it works and compared to here. And you can see that in every country, which seems to be fairly close to Australia, but you can always find fairly important differences in all aspects of life. And another quote, I think that's the last one: just being able to communicate with people who know a different language from you is really a great feeling. And I do agree with this, and I can't help casting my mind back a lot of years ago when I was actually a student, when I couldn't speak English. And all of a sudden, after having spent some time in England, I could actually have a conversation with people, in pubs and things like that. And I thought, this is magic. This is really something that is a great feeling, because a lot of people think that learning another language is not a natural thing to do, but actually it is, because most people around the world are actually bilingual or trilingual, if you think about it. Unfortunately, this is not the case in Australia, but I guess it's up to you to make that happen. And studying at Flinders is going to give you quite a lot of choices. So now we're going to look at what's available at Flinders. You can actually do 5 languages at Flinders, which are Flinders-based languages. So we've got French, we've got Indonesian, we've got Italian, we have modern Greek and Spanish. So we've got basically 4 European-based languages and 1 Asian-based languages. But you can actually do other languages through an agreement we have with Adelaide University. It's called Studying Cross-Institutionally. And you can do Chinese, German and Japanese. So all it takes is basically for you to go to Adelaide University. Well, first you have to enroll in those particular subjects, but all it takes is go to Adelaide University and just take the topics there, the courses there, and that's it. That's all it takes. It's very easy. Marks are credited automatically to Flinders, and it's a very easy process. And we have quite a few students who are actually doing it. So let's be a little bit technical now, because we're going to talk about how languages are organized and what the pathways are actually at Flinders University. So we've got two streams. One is called beginner stream, the other one is called advanced stream. So remember that you don't have to have done year 12 of a language to do a language at Flinders. And in fact, a lot of students, probably the majority of students, are beginner students. So the beginner stream is obviously for people who either have done a bit of a language before or have done no language before. But the very important point that I want to make is that our classes are actually geared towards people who have done no language. Even if you've done a bit of language, that's fine, but we don't actually presume that students are going to have done any language when they start. So basically we start from the very, very, very beginning of languages. For those who have done year 12, then we've got what we call the advanced stream. What I should also actually point out is that we've got 4 levels of languages at Flinders. So we've got the beginner's language, we've got the intermediate language, we've got the upper intermediate language, and we've got the advanced language. So a beginner would do the introductory, the intermediate, and the upper intermediate levels, those 3 levels. The advanced student would do the intermediate, the upper intermediate, in the advanced. So that's how it works. So what's the difference between what kind of proficiency you achieve at both levels? So if you get to the end of the upper intermediate level, you have a very good working knowledge of the language. You can talk about a vast range of topics in a fairly fluent manner. Obviously, I've got to qualify this because it is going to be different from one student to the next, because people don't come with exactly the same skills as far as language learning is concerned. But obviously, the upper intermediate allows you to go to the country, and we've had students who've actually studied in the country with that level. The advanced level is obviously a bit more advanced, and it basically gets you to a stage where you can write essays in the language. Obviously, again, I've got to qualify this. It's going to depend on the student's skills, but also on the language. You're not going to progress in the same way, for example, if you do Japanese or Chinese, as opposed if you do Italian or Spanish. Okay, so we can move to the next slide. Oops, I think okay. All right, so we've got a few schemes that could be of interest to you. Let's talk with the Bachelor of Letters, which I think I'll talk about a little bit later. So Bachelor of Letters is basically an add-on that you can use concurrently with your main degree. So let's say that you're doing a degree which doesn't have room for languages. Well, you can do a language by doing a Bachelor of Letters. And a Bachelor of Letters basically allows you to do just that language concurrently with the other degree that you're doing. But I'll talk about this later on. You can actually skip first year as well. If, for example, in year 12, you have an adjusted 8 hour of 19 of 20 or 20, you are given the option of either going into first year or going straight into second year. And it's all up to you. Some people prefer to do the first year, and some people say, no, I'm fine, I'm going to go straight into second year.
And Eric, just to confirm, that score 19 or 20 out of 20, that's for the languages
Yes,
topic.
yes, yes,
so
yes.
if they've done French
Yeah.
at Year 12 and
Yes.
they've got 19 or 20 out of 20 for their French results,
Yeah.
then they have the opportunity to skip first year, same for Greek or whatever.
Yes,
else.
absolutely.
Cool.
That's exactly it. And apologies for not actually make that point. Okay, so and basically what happens if you do the advanced entry is that it's only at the end of third year that you are given the first year. So because we want you to complete your major before giving you the first year. But once you've completed, you've got the full 36 units which you have to have for a major. Okay, so let's have a look at the different ways you can study a language. So there's basically 5 different ways you can do it. You can do it as an elective. So an elective is basically an option. You can say, okay, I'm going to try Spanish for 1 semester and I'll see how it goes. So you do an elective. It doesn't necessarily tie you up to doing more language. You can actually finish and say, no, I'm fine after 1 semester. You can do a minor as well, so it all depends on how much room you've got in your degree to do languages, but you can do a minor as well. So a minor is a 2-year sequence, which is the equivalent of 5 topics, 5 Flinders topics or subjects, if you want to call them that way. Or you can do a full major, which is the 3-year sequence and 8 topics. Now we've got another major, which is called extended major. It's only available in the Bachelor of Languages, and you can do 10 topics within that major. And there is the Bachelor of Letters, as I mentioned before, which is a 3-year sequence as well, which you study alongside your main degree. So let me tell you a little bit about the Bachelor of Languages, which is obviously our main degree in languages. It's a 3-year full-time degree, or more if you're going to study part-time. It's the only degree that has a concentration of language and culture in South Australia. There is another degree, another Bachelor of Languages at another university, but if you look at the structure, they don't have as much language and culture as we do in the Flinders one. And obviously that involves opportunities to study abroad, a choice of 5 languages at Flinders, plus some languages that you can do at Adelaide University. And this degree, which I must say is not a professional degree, doesn't give you a professional qualification, but it does open doors to language-specific careers such as the ones we talked about before, translating, interpreting, teaching languages, and so on and so forth. Now, the other very interesting thing about the Bachelor of Languages is that you can combine it with other degrees. You can do it by itself, or you can do it with another degree. So if obviously you're doing it with another degree, it's going to add a few more years to your studies. So let's have a look at what's available. So we've got the Bachelor of International Relations, which is a 4-year degree. The Bachelor of International Tourism, the Bachelor of Laws and Legal Practice. So this one is a bit longer because the Bachelor of Laws is a bit longer. And again, you can do it at honours level as well. So we also have a pathway with education, and there is the possibility of doing a Bachelor of Languages and a Bachelor of Education together, but it's limited to secondary schooling. So quite a lot of opportunities and pathways, and people don't have to think just in terms of doing languages, but the combination is really something that is interesting as well. So I talked about the Bachelor of Letters, so I'm not going to say too much more about it, except that because it's an add-on, it's going to add 1 extra year to a degree. And as I said, if you think about how it works, it's basically studying your degree and alongside just adding on a major, which is the equivalent of the Bachelor of Letters. It's equivalent to a major. Okay, so all our Flinders languages are eligible for the Bachelor of Letters, but not the Adelaide Uni languages. Further study options. So after a bachelor, you can do honors. So we've got a Bachelor of Arts honors where languages can be studied. We've got a Master of Language Studies, which can be done either after honors or at the same time. We've got the Master of Arts, which is a research focused degree, and we've got, of course, the PhD, which also a research focused degree, and we do have some masters and PhDs in our among our students, so that's great. Now I want to say a few things about two areas that are related to languages. One is applied linguistics, which is basically looking at how language is used. So it looks at how language is learned, acquisition of language. It looks at how language is taught, but also it looks at things like language policies and so on and so forth. It's a very popular major at Flinders University, and a lot of students who are doing languages actually tend to do languages and applied linguistics because those two majors are complementary. So they're available in the Bachelor of Arts, the Bachelor of Education and Arts, and the Bachelor of Languages. Just a quick list of possible topics that people can do in applied linguistics: how language works, language in society, intercultural communication, and Australian languages. Another area is TESOL. So TESOL stands for Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, and so it is actually a teaching qualification. We actually qualify students into teaching English, but it's not just teaching, it has also a lot to do with applied linguistics. So applied linguistics and TESOL are very related, and in fact in the future our TESOL stream and our applied linguistics stream are going to share topics. So it's a nice way to actually combine TESOL and applied linguistics, TESOL or a language, and why not the three of them? So TESOL is interesting because it can also get you places. It's used very often, our qualifications are used very often for students to go and teach English overseas, so you get to travel as well, you get to meet people from different cultures, and it also can be done in combination with another degree, so it's a very interesting degree in itself. There's many options that you can study TESOL with. You've got the graduate certificate, the graduate diploma, the master's, you can even do a PhD, but you can do it as a major, as a minor, as well as an undergraduate study sequence. It's offered online and on campus, so if you live fairly far from a campus, you can do TESOL online. There's absolutely no problem as well. So why don't you give it a try? We talked about languages, we talked about applied linguistics, we talked about TESOL, and those three areas basically help you develop a wide range of skills. And as I said in my introduction, those skills can be transferred to other study areas. So yes, it is true that language learning requires a certain degree of dedication, and you've got to work regularly, you've got to make sure that you're organized. But my point is that languages is extremely rewarding because it brings that dimension, that international dimension that not really many other fields of study do. It's very rewarding personally because you get to speak another language with other people, you get to interact with other people, but also it can give you a job. So it's really something that is worth trying. And I think what I would say as well, which is actually very important, is that the languages basically are a small family. We've got fairly small classes. Everybody knows each other. We basically progress through the years together, and there is this dimension of proximity, of being together, of being a family, which is very, very good. And I think that's a trademark of Flinders. We are all of us are actually native speakers, so that's also something that is very important to consider. So that's it for me, and Nicole is back.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was wonderful. I think that's really important as well, not learning a language from someone who has gone on to learn that language themselves, but someone who is actually native in that area, and also from the cultural aspects as well, because not just studying purely about the language and how to speak that specific language, it's also all the cultural experiences and stuff surrounding that. Flinders recently held a really big cultural experience day for France, so we had our French day on campus, which was amazing. As part of that French day, we actually signed an agreement with the government in France as well that enables students to go across to France and provide basically funding from the government to assist you with those sorts of opportunities and things as well. But it was a fabulous day on campus. There was lots of activities, lots of speakers, lots of croissants and crepes and everything as well, very important. But having those other opportunities and stuff is really, really helpful. It makes a real difference, I think. You get a bit more immersed in the language and the culture surrounding it rather than just learning this word means this.
That's right, and that's not what we do. That's not what we do. We really try to contextualize language learning. So language learning is a contextualized field of study, and it's also very social. So there's a lot of interaction, there's a lot of things we do together, activities that we do, and that's part of the fun.
Awesome. So if you would like to apply for the Bachelor of Languages, applications are currently open through SATAC. Initial application closing date is the 28th of September, so you want to get your application in before basically end of next week. Applications after that date will still be accepted, and that's perfectly fine. There's just going to be late fees, so to avoid those ones, please get your application in before the 28th of September. You can still go back in and change your preferences around as many times as you want, and by change I mean add, delete, move them around, reorder them, whatever you want to do, until the 3rd of January for the main offer round as well. If you're interested in one of those Bachelor of Languages combined degrees as well, you'll be able to apply for that through SATAC. If you're interested in the Bachelor of Letters, which is able to be added into basically any other degree at Flinders, and do a language as part of that Bachelor of Letters, you'll actually be able to add in the Bachelor of Letters once you receive your offer to your initial course. So for example, if you want to do a Bachelor of Engineering and also study modern Greek at the same time, you can do so through the Bachelor of Letters. But when you apply initially, you'll be applying for the Bachelor of Engineering, and then we'll give you the opportunity once you've got that offer to add in the Bachelor of Letters directly through us as well. Please keep in touch. I think we've had many questions come through, but if you do have any questions after today, you're always welcome to give us a call or send us through an email. Always happy to give responses and help you work out what you want to do, or maybe different ways of structuring it. There's lots of different ways of doing languages at Flinders, and there's ways of doing multiple languages at Flinders as well. So if you've got particular passions in particular different areas, give us a call or send us through an email, and we'll be able to work out the best way for you to go about combining all of those options together. We also have a range of upcoming webinars, so there'll be a couple of generic ones on things like scholarships, university life, what that's all about, and also other specific study areas. So if you're interested in those other ones, check them out too. There's also one on the Bachelor of Letters, which will cover a little bit about how it's structured, though we've spoken most about the languages side of that today. The Bachelor of Letters might be another good one to check out as well, though, because there's a few other things available in it also. But thank you so much for joining us, Eric.
It was a pleasure.
That was
wonderful. A pleasure.
Thanks,
and
everyone.
I'm looking forward to see you at Flinders very soon.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody.
3